the speakers and the participants to this webinar. I am Miriam Vilela, Executive Director of the Earthcharta International. We named today's session as East and West Dialogue on Ecological Civilization. And we envision it to be the first of a series of sessions, such as this one, that we will organize on a topic around ecological civilization. We consider this webinar as a sort of kickstart of the conference we are having in April 2024 on reimagining education for ecological civilization, which we have been organizing both this webinar and the conference under our UNESCO chair on education for sustainable development with the Earthcharta, which is co-hosted by the Earthcharta Center on Education for Sustainable Development and the University for Peace. Today's webinar is organized as a collaborative effort between several organizations and people. First, the China Biodiversity Conservation and Green Development Foundation, the Institute for Ecological Civilization, the Center for Process Studies, the Club of Rome, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Well, all of them have been working around this interesting topic of ecological civilization. And we want to thank each one of these organizations, but also the speakers and the participants who are joining us today. And now I would like to give the floor to our two co-moderators, Amanda Bennett and Sifan Jiang. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Miriam. Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today, this evening, or this morning for you. My name is Amanda Bennett, and I will be joining you along with Sifan Jiang as we will be moderating this great panel. First, I want to introduce our speakers so you know who we will be hearing from. Very briefly, you can also find their full biographies on our website. So today we'll be hearing from Ms. Chen, who is a research fellow at the Institute of Philosophy, director of editorial department for the Journal of Philosophical Trends and Chinese Philosophical Almanac at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences in Beijing. She is an executive committee member of various international organizations and has been a visiting scholar at various universities around the world. And her specialty is Chinese philosophy and religions, concentrating on Taoism. And she has authored many books and contributed to hundreds of articles to a number of journals, both in Chinese and English. We are also joined today by Dr. David Korten, who is the founder and president of the Living Economies Forum, co-founder and board chair of Emeritus of Yes magazine, and a full member of the Club of Rome. He is an American author, former professor, political activist, and author of When Corporations Rule the World and The Great Turning, From Empire to Earth Community, among many other publications. We're also joined by Dr. W.M. Andrew Schwartz, a scholar, organizer, and social entrepreneur. He is the executive director of the Center for Process Studies and assistant professor of process studies and comparative theology with Claremont School of Theology, as well as the co-founder and vice president of the Institute for Ecological Civilization. His current work includes comparative religious philosophy, as well as the role of big ideas in bringing about systems change for the long-term well-being of people and the planet. And we're also joined today by Ms. Sukhyun Park from South Korea, who is an activist and a researcher with a diverse experience spanning both civil society movements, such as the Korea Federation for the Environmental Movement, and research institutions. Currently, she leads the Sustainable Systems Research Institute, focusing on sustainability, sustainable urban governance, social ecological systems, and ecosystem services. Her expertise, cultivated through academic pursuits in environmental science and natural resource management, has led her to instruct courses on environmental policy, governance, sustainable development at various universities, including Kyung University in South Korea. So these are our panelists. Today, as I mentioned, I will be co-moderating the session with Ms. Sifan Jiang. who is a dedicated sustainability professional. She holds a master's degree in responsible management and sustainable economic development, and she specializes in ESG reporting and supply chain management. And Sifan is from Beijing, China. And I am joining you today from the Earth Charter Education Center for Education for Sustainable Development in Costa Rica, where I am originally from. I also grew up in the United States, and my background is in environment and development, public policy, and psychology. So thank you all so much again for joining us. I will now be passing the microphone to Ms. Sifan Jiang, who will begin by asking the first question to our amazing panel today.
Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, Median, for inviting me to this wonderful conversation. And this is Sifan. I'm so honored to be one of the moderators today. In this webinar, we will continue with the conversation about ecological civilization. If you would like to learn more, there is a webinar series on Earth Charter's website, and then you can listen to lots of insights about the ecological civilization before. So today, I really look forward to all the new insights from our guest speakers today. So let's get started. Here is our first question. What is an ecological civilization? So let's begin with Andrew.
Of course, you would start with me. Of all the, what is an ecological civilization? I should be able to give a good answer on that because I wrote a book called "What is an Ecological Civilization?" Surprisingly, it's actually not always easy to articulate, in part because we're describing something that we don't actually have examples of. And also because the phrase gets used in different ways by different people. So I'll say what I believe. When I say ecological civilization, here's what I mean by it. I am talking about a way of organizing human life, right? So a way our societies are designed that promote equity, inclusion, diversity, sustainability. We're talking about living in harmony with nature and harmony with one another. It's a peaceful society. It's a society where that's committed to health rather than wealth, or rather than money, where not only is green gold, but actually green is more than gold, where we're living within our ecological means, in balance with the rest of the living earth, rather than destroying it for short-term financial gain. Actually, the more I start talking about what I mean by ecological civilization, the more I feel like it sounds like some utopian dream. And that actually, I realize is really sad. Because when you talk about a peaceful, sustainable existence of human life on this planet, that shouldn't be utopian. That should just be normal. And that's what I mean when I say ecological civilization.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And then really looking forward to your book. I know you probably already read it, but then probably you can share the book with us in the chat so we can all read it.
Sure.
So next one, Professor Sukhyun, can you share your ideas on ecological civilization?
Okay, first of all, I'm truly honored to be here to discuss and share some ideas about the ecological civilization. It's a huge topic, but yeah, and also I'm afraid that I won't be able to represent any of the East perspective very well. So I'm just a scholar and a researcher, as you introduced. So what the ecological civilization mean to me is I think that is the most important and only one future paradigm that solve many of our current problems, which are connected, interconnected each other. So it's kind of the overarching solution to all our society. And sometimes people say that when they are told about ecological civilization, they argue that we cannot go back to the time when the way things were before all this civilization, I mean the modern civilization occurred. So I think ecological civilization is not based on the past, but it's something that has to go forward. And so I think it's a civilization that future civilizations are bound to encounter. In particular, in countries like Korea, which has achieved growth in a very short period of time, following developed countries. And we are encountering the problem of low growth and a shrinking society for the first time. We never had such low growth and then low population growth, I mean, birth rate. So this phenomenon is the kind of the things that we that cause our society lose our way. So we are kind of getting lost these days in Korea. So many economists say that we should go from a catch-up economy to a leapfrog economy as a frontier. But I think it is also from the point of view of a growth economists. So those mindset doesn't work for the future, I think. So I think the future that we need to go recognize and accept and create, reorganize is ecological civilization. So probably that's this new paradigm is going to be based on the degrowth, I think. Yeah, that's all my view. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Sukhyun. And I really agree with your idea because the civilization is not only for the past, but also more importantly for the future. Because when we talk about sustainable, and then, sustainable is not also for our generation only, but for next generations as well. So, and Professor David, what's your idea on ecological civilization?
Yeah, thank you. To me, an ecological civilization is the future that thoughtful humans envision when they're asked to describe the future to which they actually aspire, how we want to live. And the thing that I find extraordinary is that it is exactly the future described by the Earth Charter, which is a document that was produced by one of the most participatory and inclusive drafting processes ever in human experience. That charter arrived at a global human consensus on 4 defining elements of the future we seek together. 1, respect and care for the community of life. 2, ecological integrity. 3, social and economic justice. And 4, democracy, nonviolence, and peace. And I do believe it is within our human means, if we together so choose, to create the world of material sufficiency and spiritual abundance for all that the Earth Charter describes. We humans are a living Earth species of extraordinary potential. We are distinctive in our capacity to choose our future with conscious collective intention. And we now face a defining choice as expressed by these opening words of the Earth Charter preamble. Quote, "We stand at a critical moment in Earth's history, a time when humanity must choose its future. As the world becomes increasingly interdependent and fragile, the future at once holds great peril and great promise. To move forward, we must recognize that in the midst of a magnificent diversity of cultures and life forms, we are one human family and one Earth community with a common destiny." The Earth Charter is an essential document for everyone committed to creating the future of respect and care for the living Earth community that all caring humans seek. To create that future, we must discuss it. And if we're going to discuss it, we must name it. Ecological civilization seems to be the emerging name of choice for the future we are now challenged to create together. 4 defining features will distinguish an ecological civilization as described by the Earth Charter from the world we now have. 1, decision-making will be predominantly local and flow from the bottom up rather than the top down, and it will be truly democratic. 2, wealth and power will be equitably shared. 3, life rather than money will be the defining purpose and value. Once basic needs have been met, our focus will be on being more, not having more. And 4, relationships will feature caring and sharing rather than competition and violence. Now, this transformation needed to achieve a viable human future presents a daunting challenge, but fortunately, we have enormous opportunities to reduce the human burden on Earth in ways that potentially improve the quality of life for all. Imagine a world free of toxins, air and water pollution, and other wastes. A world with little urban noise, no war, no extremes of wealth and poverty. A world in which most transportation needs are met by walking, biking, public transportation, and car sharing with no long commutes and traffic jams. Where the production, sale, and use of military weapons is prohibited, and where every child is a wanted child assured of a good education and opportunity to be valued as a contributing member of their community and a secure retirement. This vision is more than possible, it is essential, and it is within our means. Do we have the will, the wisdom, and the time? We will know only if we try. So back to you.
Thank you, Professor David. I agree with your ideas about Earth Charter, this concept of Earth Charter has, because, Earth Charter, they didn't really want to separate all these ideas. They have the pillars like the ecological integrity and also economic and social development, and all these pillars, they are interact with each other. So instead of separating ideas, so they were actually bringing all the ideas together and to support the ecological civilization. So thank you, Professor David. And let's give time to Professor Chen.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Very pleased to be here and to be invited to this interesting dialogue. For the question of what is ecological civilization, I think the three speakers already gave a very good answer. I myself really agree with them. The current global reality can be summed up in civilization being on a collision course with boundaries of the Earth system. Several planetary boundaries have been overshot, and 2 of them are of particular significance: the capacity of carbon cycle in the climate system and the speciation extinction balance in the biosphere. Breaking through the carbon boundary has caused climate change. Overshooting the biodiversity boundary has unleashed a global extinction event. So avoiding the hothouse fate requires a reduction of carbon emissions to 50% by 2030 and to 0 by 2050. This means humanity has several years left to embark on worldwide decarbonization and step back from the cliff. This requires an evolutionary leap for civilization. The civilization we need, we can call it ecological civilization. So this, to achieve or to move forward to this civilization, need each of us to do something for it. Like to change, just now, our speakers mentioned about change the way of consumption, change the way of production, and change the way how we live. So ecological civilization is really a great leap forward for human beings. We need to do it now. And ecological civilization, for me, I think that's a civilization I myself would like to live with. The other civilizations, or maybe destroy the natural environment or destroy the harmonious relationship among human beings. But ecological civilization will have harmonious relationship between ourselves, our mind and heart, and between people from different nations, from different civilization background or cultural background, and a good harmonious friendship with our Mother Earth, our natural environment. So if we have that civilization and we work for that civilization, I think we will live much more happier life than we have now. So deep ecological civilization is really, really what we need. So I'm happy to listen to our speakers explain their ideas. So that's my brief point on this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chen. And I think, like you mentioned, this is a changing time, and also it's a joint efforts to achieve ecological civilization. So, Andrew, do you want to make a quick comment on this?
Yeah. So, I just love listening to everybody else because you're all just so smart and wonderful. And every time I hear somebody else speak, I'm like, yeah, that's what we need to say. But it occurred to me that it might be helpful to say something about why ecological and why civilization. Like, why are these two words being used to describe this vision for a better world? And I think part of it is this, and sometimes we get criticized for the term civilization because it's, got bad connotations with sort of imperialism and colonialism and sort of this top-down imposition of things that doesn't leave room for contextualism and diversity and the flourishing of local context. But I think the reason that I like the term civilization to describe this is because it is one of the broadest terms that I can think of that describes the totality of how humans live, right? So when I say an ecological civilization, I mean to rethink our systems of agriculture, our modes of consumption and production, our economies, our schools and the way we do education, our political systems and our ways of governance and decision-making as communities, our ways that we design our cities, our streets, are we car dependent or not? How do we design our buildings? How do we practice our religion? I mean, all of these kinds of things and many, many more are part of what make up our civilizations. So to rethink civilization is to rethink the vast breadth of what it means to be human and how humans should be living. But why ecological? And I think sometimes people are resistant to say, okay, well, an ecological civilization is just part of an environmental movement and it only cares about trees, it doesn't care about people. You're just an environmental organization. And I think that's a misunderstanding of why I like the language of ecological, because for me, the social and the social issues and the environmental issues are not exclusive, but they're actually interconnected. And to talk about civilization in an ecological way is to talk about that interconnection and that intersection of the social and the environmental, realizing that they're not two separate things, but one part of one complex web of life. And actually, that's the word that, David, you use a lot in your work that I really like, which is life. So an ecological civilization, what makes it ecological is that it's actually promoting the flourishing of life, right? It's a life-affirming way of organizing human communities, which has been in contrast to a life-destroying form of existence. So in that way, I feel like the language of ecological civilization, but also the vision of ecological civilization is a great contrast to what we actually have today, but points us toward where we need to go. If there's going to be a civilization of the future, it has to be an ecological one. Because if there's going to be a civilization of the future, it has to be one that affirms life. Because without life, there's no civilization. And when you start dealing at those sort of basic fundamental principles, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, okay, that kind of makes sense. So that's why I like listening to David and Shia and Sukhyun and everything. It's like, oh yeah, you guys make sense. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So we all respect lives. So that's why we enjoy listening to lives. That's our panelists' thoughts on the first question. Let's pass the voice to Amanda, and then she will start with the second question.
Thank you, Sifan. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so as Dr. Korten said, okay, we decided on a term, ecological civilization. Thank you all for giving us your definitions for it and your thoughts. So let's talk about how to get there. So in more detail. So what are those possible paths and driving forces to get to ecological civilizations? And let's hear again from Dr. Sukhyun Park.
Okay. Well, I just thought about the limits to growth. And then because Dr. David Korten told us about the Earth Charter's preamble and then the basic philosophy based on such a recognition about the problems that we are facing right now. And it started early 1970s. We talked about the sustainability issues at the since then, but we still has such problem, and then nothing is solved yet. And but I think because I'm living in Korea, I feel like I'm facing we are walking toward the path toward somewhere part of the ecological civilization because of the physical or the population demographic changes actually initiate this kind of changes. So I think the most important key to go forward toward the ecological civilization is to find out what initiates such a system change toward ecological civilization. So it depends on each country's situation, their ecological state. Like Korea, we have shrinking biodiversity, and then a lot of risk they are facing because of the climate change. So this climate change cause a lot of disasters these days, like the storms and droughts and low harvesting, pollutions, and algal blooms. So these are the problems that we are facing too. So also some these countries who are going through this severe challenges, then probably they can think about their behavior change or their social changes about the ecological to solve ecological problems. But other countries like some country may have political leaders who think about this ecological civilization through policy change or social adaptation. So I'm not sure, but China looks like China has ecological civilization has a huge topic for the whole society. So China would be the example who has the leader who's driving these changes. And also some countries may have an education system that requires various chances to learn about it. So mainstreaming, I think the education and the policy change, those things are the way of mainstreaming of ecological civilization. So that is the one way of path towards system change, because everybody gets to know about it then. So especially those who work for the government realize that they need to consider climate change and biodiversity and whatever they work on. So that is mainstreaming. Because these days gender has been mainstreaming in Korea. So the gender equality or equity, those are the very most important policy theme that the Korean government's trying to do. So that is part of the mainstreaming. And the ecological civilization and climate change, those are also can be the mainstreaming of policy change. So that drive our system change too. So the other economy department or labor department or educational culture or leisure or whatever the departments, all this government system change will be followed by other social organizations change too. So including corporations or social organizations who never thought about the ecological civilization, probably they will think about it. So what is the key driving force to initiate system change is, I think, the most important thing. All right.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you for emphasizing that leadership and mainstreaming through policy change, through education, and contextualizing the issue. Thank you so much, Dr. Park. And Dr. Korten, what do you think? What do you think are the possible paths to get there from your perspective?
Interesting question. To me, first of all, just simply begin with the simple and obvious. Referring to the future we seek as an ecological civilization, and then identifying the Earth Charter as its defining document. A simple starting point. We humans have a distinctive ability to imagine alternative futures grounded in alternative stories. Creatures of the mind, we live by the stories by which we know ourselves, our purpose for being, and the source of our well-being. With this in mind, I want to share with you two defining personal experiences that have fundamentally shaped my understanding of life and the best of what it means to be human. The first was a chance meeting in May 1997 at a conference in Spain. Dr. Mei Wan Ho, a brilliant molecular biologist of Chinese ancestry, introduced herself to me, and she said, "I know your work on the dysfunctions of the global economy, and I believe my work on living cells may be relevant." Well, that got my attention. She proceeded to awaken me to the simple truth that life is conscious, intelligent, and complex far beyond the frame of the scientific understanding of that time, only 26 years ago. And here's basically what she said to me, quote, "The conventional biologist grinds up a living cell, studies its chemical composition, and thinks they have learned something about life. I study living cells and their continuing exchange of nutrients, water, energy, and information. Each human body is comprised of tens of trillions of living cells, half of them microorganisms, all self-organized together with no mechanism of central control. They together create and maintain the vessel of our consciousness and the instrument of our agency on which we each depend." Wow, that blew my mind. Dr. Ho went on to explain that the living Earth is itself a far larger and more complex organism, an even more breathtaking example of the wondrous collaboration by which life creates the conditions on this planet essential to life's existence. Now, at this point in my life, I had a PhD in organization theory from the Stanford Business School, and I had served for 8 years on the Harvard University faculty, teaching organization at its business school and then its School of Public Health. This was the first time that I had ever heard mention of these obvious truths about life's extraordinary ability to self-organize. The life sciences have since made enormous advances aligned with Dr. Ho's insights. And these are insights that we must bring together in our rethinking of human civilization. Another life-defining experience came from my January 1992 visit to South Africa. This was during South Africa's transition from apartheid and from white to black leadership. I was an invited guest lecturer in a course preparing those who had been imprisoned along with Nelson Mandela and were preparing to assume leadership of the new government. These black leaders had endured years of history's most extreme, violent, and degrading imprisonment. I was totally stunned. When these former prisoners spoke with compassion of their white jailers and how their imprisonment had dehumanized their jailers much as it had dehumanized themselves, it was the most profound expression of a human capacity for compassion that I have ever experienced. An expression of the potential that gives me hope that we humans may be able to find our way to a viable future of an ecological civilization grounded in the principles of the Earth Charter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korten. Thank you so much for answering the question through those stories. Very powerful. We'll be able to remember them as we continue thinking about this conversation in the following days and in the next year. And thank you for reminding us about these values, highlighting these values, and reminding us that they're also in this document, the Earth Charter, that we can use as well on this path to ecological civilizations. And Professor Chen, what about you? What is your perspective on the path to ecological civilization?
I think just now, Professor Park has mentioned several ways, and also David mentioned several ways to achieve ecological civilization. For me, I think if we want to change our behavior, change our way of living, we all need a kind of philosophy to provide us ideas for these changes. People living by their, just now David mentioned, human beings, we're doing things consciously. So whatever we do, there is a philosophy back it up. So we need green ideas or new kind of philosophy to help us to move to that path or to even open that path. So by having a kind of philosophy which is relevant to ecological civilization, I think some traditions, we can use the traditional resources which give us inspiration, such as, I will say something about Taoism. I think just now, David mentioned his understanding of this question. It reminds me, the ancient Chinese philosophy, Taoism. I think Taoism is equipped to handle this sea change for an ecological civilization. It has, conceptual resources to responding to the collision course with these boundaries we just mentioned, and supplying the shift conceptions. We need to shift our conceptions. First, now I think many people read Dao De Jing, the book. Taoist Lao says in the world we have a Dao. Dao gave birth to everything, but it claims no authority to the things it created. So by following Taoist philosophy, nature and culture have merged. Nature merged into culture, because the fate of human civilization is now tied to biosphere integrity and climate stability. Culture merges into nature because human activity is now affecting the functioning of the Earth system. So by following the Tao, Lao Tzu, the founder, he encouraged us to cherish three core values. That is compassion, frugality, and dare not to take the lead. Instead of compassion, civilization proceeds with lack of empathy. Instead of frugality, former civilization embraces consumerism. Instead of humility, civilization indulges in hubris. Now, civilization ought to aspire to a cultural paradigm of compassion, frugality, and humility instead of dominating nature. So if we follow this principle, we need to know the nature's flow is the center of all things. Just now, David mentioned that. And yet humans occupy a special place. They are equal human beings. They are equal yet superior to their non-human kin, because equal in that we share the needs and vulnerabilities with all living beings. But we are superior in that we have free will. We have empathy with non-human others, and empathy grounded in humility and in kinship of life. So we should say climate change or environment depletion can be reigned only by interventions ranging from sequestration to reforestation and to decarbonization. This required from humanity is to serve as healers of the Earth system. As healers, we would put nature's flow front and center while playing a leading yet serving role. To avoid the hothouse fate forces us to assume the mantle of planetary stewardship, avoid any unnecessary tampering to humans, other things, and the environment. I think that's a point David mentioned about the self-organization. So my way for the past is to have a kind of philosophy, support our new way of living. And I give Taoism as an example, which can provide some inspiration for the philosophy we need. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. Yes, and thank you for answering this question through your experience with Taoism and just being part of. I just wanted to take a pause and appreciate this opportunity we have right now for this intercultural, multicultural exchange. There's people, you're inspiring people with your answers, and I'm seeing in the chat, people are making these connections as well from their context. So Gautam is bringing to the conversation the concept of Ubuntu. We have all of these different ideas. So thank you for yours on Taoism as well. And now, yes, to conclude this question on the path to get there, let's hear from Dr. Andrew Schwartz.
Thanks, Amanda. It's great going last, by the way, because then I can just say, well, yeah, everything they said, yes to that. Because I'm going through my notes and I'm thinking through all the, it's like, well, yes, of course. I completely agree with Professor Chen. We can't just continue our current way of thinking, hoping that new greener technologies are going to save us. That's not enough, right? We need a radical, well, as David has written about, we need to change the story to change the future, right? We need to shift away from sacred money, sacred markets, framing to a sacred life, living earth perspective. So there's a radical shift, paradigm shift, you might say, in mindset. And maybe I'm biased to thinking that's important because as a philosopher and scholar of religion, it's like, well, yeah, that's what I specialize in, is changing the way you think. But it does seem to be empirically important to changing the trajectory of how we live. So I think changing mindsets, changing values and worldviews is really fundamentally critical. And philosophy, religion, culture are a really important piece to that, which again, as David had pointed to the Earth Charter, it does that so beautifully, right? I also, I really liked, I mean, what Professor Park was saying as well with, you know, we need to change education. Education is key, and that informs policy change. And policy change is really where you get systems change and structural change. So it's like the worldview change then becomes sort of applied. But that even together, those things, I mean, those yes, are those possible paths and important forces for how we get toward an ecological civilization? All of that, yes. Here's what nobody has actually said yet, I think. What is the driving force toward ecological civilization? Our unecological civilization. It's actually probably the greatest driving force toward an ecological civilization is our current messed up, broken civilization. It's the one that's destroying the way of life on this planet. It's just, it can't continue. It's not because we want it to change because we don't like it. No, it's because it just can't. Like there are actual limits to growth. There's limits to consumption. There's limits to, you know, the planet, right? To the living earth. And our current ways just can't continue. So if there's going to be something after what we have now, it has to be more ecological. And I think the more that people come to realize that, and I see a lot of this in the chat, which is wonderful, economics, right? We need new models of economies, new systems of economic, exchange, because the one that we have that's designed on maximizing consumption in order to create a radical concentration of capital and power in just the hands of a few billionaires, that's actually the system that's driving us toward the cliff of self-extinction. It's not going to work. So you need a new system that's set to rethink how we understand ownership, to rethink how we understand wealth, to rethink how we understand money, to rethink all of these sorts of things in the context of healthy communities, healthy people, healthy planets, right? And I think the more sort of desperate we become for these alternatives, the closer we get to really the domino starting to, I mean, when you look at, well, I don't want to go down the path of despair and talking about how far away we are from meeting our 2030 agenda goals, but needless to say, the driving force toward an ecological civilization is just the fact that it's what we have now doesn't work. And the more we become clearly aware of that, the more we're going to look for different ways of doing things.
Thank you, Professor Andrew Schwartz. And then since we all talk about the driving forces and we mentioned a lot about the mindset, and then let's have the third question for today. So what are some good examples paving the way towards this vision? Let's start with Professor Sukhyun Park. Thank you.
Okay, I'm again the first one. But yeah, I agree to all the ideas about the system change and how to get there through what path. And I'm pretty much agree, but also we know about the problem well, but we know how to get out of it. We don't know exactly how to get out of it because we got used to it. And then all the capitalism things and material and the prosperities are all in our life. But I'm thinking about the different way that Sustainable Development Goals has, because I'm the researcher and then I'm participating in making or planning local government's Sustainable Development Goals. But the problem is they don't actually recognize and acknowledge the value of the sustainable development. They're approaching technically. So each department actually use as policy tools and then their policy goals. So yeah, a few minutes ago, there's one the audience said about that, the love is ecological civilization. That reminds me that I had a talk with my old advisor. She mentioned about why don't we live based on love, not the goal, but sustainable development and all sustainability, and we are thinking about how to get the goal or how to reach the goal. So I think that is kind of the fundamental change that we have to have in our views on the world views and the paradigms. So I think that is important. And I think that is also related to the current emerging change that I can look into, because the new generation Z, Gen Z, they have different social values than the older generation has. So I think these changes actually can help us find out how to use these strategies into our society's fundamental change. So I know the Earth Charter will hold a conference about the education, reimagination of education and ecological civilization. And then, so since, but we don't have much time to change whole society because the climate change is coming. So I think the way that Professor Norgard, he is one of the ecological economists, said about the co-evolution of 5 things. And those are the organization, knowledge, technology, environment, and social value. And I think the social value is the basement or the base, like the love or the base of our mindset. And those base is it's kind of the hard thing to change, but once we have that base, it's gonna be pretty much comfortable and easy for us to walk through and then walk toward ecological civilization. So like in Korea, we have a new generation, Gen Z. They purchase, their consuming behavior is different from the old generation. And then they have a happiness with the small things. And then they are not really focusing on building up their properties, even though they can't. But so there are some limits, and then but the older generations social value has been changing. So I think the base, the social value, and the base that initiates all the other changes through the coevolution is important. And then I think new generation actually has the potential, the power of the future fundamental changes. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, thank you, Professor Sukhyun. And yes, the SDGs from the United Nations is very ambitious. And then we already see the emerging changes. But like you said, we need more love and also with good social value from the new generation so we can promote it and achieve it. Yeah, thank you, Professor Sukhyun. And Professor David Korten, can you share your thoughts on this question, like good examples?
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of the big picture here. The Enlightenment of the 18th century was grounded in the Newtonian image of a mechanistic universe. Now, this mechanistic image greatly expanded and deepened our human recognition and understanding of the order inherent in creation. In so doing, it set the stage for extraordinary advances in technology and social organization. It undermined faith in an authoritarian church and in the divine right of kings. It unleashed the forces of democracy and self-organizing social movements, essential to the transition to an ecological civilization on which we are now embarked. The process of drafting the Earth Charter set the stage for the unleashing of a 21st century enlightenment, a new enlightenment that draws from the ancient wisdom of indigenous peoples, insights of the great religious prophets, and findings at the current leading edge of science. The 21st century enlightenment acknowledges the intelligence and consciousness of life that the 18th century enlightenment denied. Politically, it recognizes that we have only begun the journey to a truly democratic sharing of power. Perhaps our greatest source of hope for a viable human future is now the extraordinary communications revolution of the past 100 years that is connecting we, the people of our previously scattered and isolated species, into a seamless global communications web. Recall that the first transatlantic phone call took place only in 1927, less than 100 years ago. There are now 5.4 billion internet users worldwide, 2/3 of the global population joined in a web of instant communication. Video conferencing is now a daily routine for billions of people doing what we are doing here, connecting across cultural divides in search of common values and possibilities. These intercultural conversations are now a daily occurrence all around the world. Nearly 1.5 billion people now share English as a native or second language. Another 1.1 billion share Mandarin Chinese. Those on the internet have access to instant translation. Meanwhile, women are moving into positions of leadership, power, and influence. And for the first time in thousands of years, we honor the wisdom and seek the guidance of indigenous peoples. I find particular hope in the growing interest in worker cooperative ownership of business, which moves us beyond profit maximization and connects business to community well-being. There is also growing recognition of an imperative to acknowledge and secure the rights of nature. Ecuador inserted a commitment to recognizing the rights of nature into its constitution in 2008. China added a commitment to ecological civilization to its constitution in 2018. And just 2 weeks ago, the European Union reached an agreement to make ecocide a crime punishable with jail sentences of up to 10 years and fines for companies of up to 5% of their global turnover. Global awareness of the need for dramatic, rapid change is building at light speed. People are now desperate for a vision of a possible and viable future, the future that the Earth Charter describes and ecological civilization names. So back to you.
Thank you, Professor David Korten. And then I think the current global communications really make the world smaller and then make the world more connected. And that's also part of like Earth Charter's idea. Like we have like all the countries that's interconnected with each other instead of separated those countries. Thank you, Professor Korten. And then Professor Andrew Schwartz, can you share your idea on this question?
Oh, I guess. I mean, okay, I'll be honest. I struggle with this question. And I struggle with it for two reasons. Scale and urgency. I think Sukhyun had already talked about urgency. I mean, we're talking about a need for radical change on a global scale very, very quickly. In fact, as John, one of my friends, John Cobb, wrote way back in 1970, a book called "Is It Too Late?" 50 years ago, that was a legitimate question, and now it's sort of a foregone conclusion. Yes, we're too late, at least for some things, right? We're too late to avoid, the extinction of certain species, a significant loss of coral reefs, all those sorts of things, right? But it's not too late to do something, right? And that's where I find hope, right? There's always room for something else to be done. We can still do something, and we must. But so again, this is my struggle, right? I keep thinking, well, is it enough? It's like, well, it's better than nothing. So we certainly can't just sit back and do nothing. So something is better than nothing. Is it enough? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe I just need to let go of that concern. But here's what I'm thinking. So most of the examples that come to my mind of really good work that's being done around the world to make the world a better place, it's happening on such a small scale relative to the global scope that I want more, basically. That's what I'm saying. So one of the things that I think is needed, for example, just one of the many things, right? It's not going to be enough if Sweden and Costa Rica reduce their carbon emissions dramatically and go net zero. That's just not going to fix global warming. Now, I think if the US and China were to be key partners together, that could be a pathway toward much greater success on a global scale, right? So there are things that can be done at that level, sort of at the global level, through key partnerships and collaborations that I think could bring about the kind of change we need on a faster pace. And we've talked about already, and I've said that I think, the worldview change and mindset change, and we saw some brilliant comments in the chat about not just changing what we know, but also what we care about. All of these things are so critical for the foundations of building a new kind of civilization. They also tend to be very slow processes. And so then that brings me back to the urgency question. Can we sit around and wait for people to care about the planet and care about one another? Or do we need to take more severe action? So then I struggle between, okay, well, an ecological civilization has to be both top down and bottom up. But it's got to involve policy change, and it's got to involve change on the global scale, but it also has to be expressed and experienced in local contexts and local communities and embraced by regular people. And inevitably, somebody's going to walk away from this saying, well, what can I do to move us toward an ecological civilization? And then that's where I'm like, well, I don't know. Is becoming vegan, going to make a difference? Well, it makes a difference, but is it going to be prevent, I don't know, the great mass extinction? Probably not at least if you do it by yourself. So then there's a numbers game, right? You can play where you try to figure out, well, if enough people do, 1% better, is that 1 billion% better because 1 billion people are doing it? And then if maybe there's a little bit of that, I'd like to think having somebody like Cornel West as president of the United States would be a huge step in the right direction, because here's somebody who's a consistent critique of military industrial complex and the rule of corporations at the expense of people on the planet. Would that be better having leaders in positions of power that, have that framework? Probably. So would we be better off voting in a way that votes those values toward ecological civilization? Probably. But then again, is it enough? But then I'm like, well, better than nothing. So I didn't really answer the question. I'm sorry. I don't know.
It's okay.
I hope something is useful.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that it's late because we have lots of time, and then the climate change is happening, but it's not too late because we still have opportunities. We have partnerships, and our worldview is changing, so we still have opportunities. Thank you, Professor Andrew Schwartz. And let's go to Professor Chen Xia. What's your idea on this question?
Sorry. I think Andrew really raised an interesting concern. Is it too late? Is it too little? I think it's better late than never. So, yeah.
Well
So
said.
yeah, so still, human beings, we are crucial. We are open to change if we have enough resources, inspirations, and many examples. And just now, Andrew mentioned the different level or different scale of engagement in it, national level, international level, local level, etc., from bottom up or from top to bottom. So there's still hope. I think we human beings, we live because we have hope. So since nature evolves, following nature's way means human evolve too. The self-organization of nature, David mentioned, suggests a progression of human development to higher stages of civilization. So I think we can see examples around us everywhere. Really, like the city we live, we have at least the city is much more green than before. We have much more trees, and we have some suggestions to to throw away the rubbish and etc. And generally, Taoism gave the people impression they live a hermit life. But today, the Taoist temples, they take actions. We have a project called Taoist Ecological Temple. So the temple, they construct the way to be more ecologically friendly, like start using biofuels and use solar lighting equipment, and also prevent soil erosion, and organize volunteers to pick up many litters, and also some temples in the mountain, and the mountains there are so many animals. In order not to interrupt the animals, they use special paths to avoid tampering their way of living. So in this way, they engage. I think they start to engage, and some of them engage deeply into this kind of ecological civilization building, and give us many examples. So now when people have free time, they like to go, travel, and then we travel to these kind of places. They will be impressed by the changes, by the beauty of the natural environment, and how to have a good relationship between our man-made construction and the environment. I think this will impress people and will inspire them, and also help them to change our way of living, our mindset, our way of consumption, and our way of production, and how can we live an ecological way in our lifetime. So I think we find changes, even though it's not enough, but change starts small. Maybe the small stream will flow, and then it become a big river and really change us. And we can be really ready to live for the ecological civilization. So that's my understanding. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. Thank you, everyone. Yes, as you can tell, the chat is super active, and we want to highlight some of your comments and all the inspiration that we've been getting from the panelists and your responses. So one of the first questions we'll tackle is from Gautam Krishnan, who was very impressed by the definition of ecological civilization. So the question is, how much of a role does belief systems play in the course correction towards achieving this goal? And I also saw a comment from Gautam asking if the book Limits to Growth can be used as part of a global curriculum for environmental sciences. And I just wanted to thank everyone in the chat who also added their ideas for this global curriculum that we have been forming as part of this conversation. And while our panelists are thinking, we'll do, for the sake of time, we'll do 2 more questions. So for this first one, on which I will repeat again, we'll get 2 responses from 2 panelists, and then we'll get 2 more responses for the second question. And I just wanted to highlight also some of these comments, these beautiful comments. For example, we have Stevie Harrison joining us from Indonesia, a youth activist, a science student connecting to this conversation. And Stevie shares that one of their biggest concerns is biodiversity that's being threatened seriously by the climate crisis. Mr. Jim Wolpert from the Central Washington University also gave us some inspiration, some hope. He says that if they have, in the state of Washington, in the United States, they have legislation that requires them to become carbon neutral at their universities with state funding. And this also eliminates structural racism with, there's also an initiative to eliminate structural racism with state funding. So those are 2 great examples from that corner of the states, as he has shared. Thank you. There's also a comment from Joan Anderson, who reminds us that human beings are self-organizing beings. We cannot be forced to change, only inspired to do so. Joyce Remy reminded us about values again. So what you care about, also related to these comments. It's not just what you know. We need to engage not only with the mind, but also with the heart and soul. So thank you all. So for this first question from the audience, let me read it again. Let's see. How much of a role does the belief system play in this course correction towards achieving this goal of ecological civilization? Dr. Korten, I see your hand.
It's absolutely foundational, because we are creatures of the mind. And the primary barriers to change are in the human mind. They're in our belief systems, our false belief systems. And those can change instantly. And I was thinking here as we discussed that, it's only part of the issue, but in my lifetime, 3 of the most extraordinary developments happened almost instantly. I mean, within days of when I might have been involved in conversations saying, oh, that's impossible. And then a few days later, it happens. And the examples would be Indian independence, the fall of apartheid in South Africa, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. I mean, Fran and I were having a discussion days before the Soviet Union fell, and Fran was saying, oh, that would be impossible. And it was just days later that the Berlin Wall fell. Now, none of those 3 have turned out spectacularly well, partly because there was never in place a real vision of the alternative that we wanted to put in place. And that is why I'm so excited about the Earth Charter, because it begins that framing, but it is only a beginning because it's kind of the conceptual framework. And the challenge of our time is doing the work to actually put that new structure in place. So that'd be my response to that question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korten. Thank you for these examples, the ones you have given us and the ones also in the chat. Would any of the other panelists like to tackle this question? Yes, Dr. Chen.
I really agree with David. He said, human beings, we are creatures of mind. Ecology at the beginning, this term doesn't involve too much humanities in it. I think it involved more of the natural sciences, but gradually we recognize human involvement or human beings' behavior really influence our natural environment. And now, because of the fast changes of science and technology, I think we have much more power to destroy the environment. So in that way, what human beings believe really play a role in building or constructing ecological civilization. So in that way, more of human sciences, religions, beliefs involved in ecology. So what I think it's very important for us human sciences scholars and to engage in this kind of building a new civilization, because we can use traditional resources and modern philosophical thinking and also benefit from natural sciences to have ecological belief or philosophy. Some people even say ecology become a religion for contemporary world. So if we change our mind, what we believe in, I think it will play a role, an important role for to correct our past behaviors and past social work, economic way of economic growth, etc. Back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. Go ahead, Sifan.
No, yeah, I just feel like the idea Professor Chen she mentioned, and then that's really very, very well answered for this question. And then because we have another question about China's civil ecological civilization, so I'm not sure if Professor Chen you want to comment on this one. So the question is, I understand that China has adopted the principle of building an ecological civilization constitutionally. I wonder what this means in practice, or is it too early for that?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for the question, for the audience to raise this question. Yeah, I think today China has paid very, very much attention to environment, to ecology, and to have an ecological civilization is become a national project in China. So we can see we hope this whole society move toward ecological civilization. So they got from the government and from the folk and from common people. I think everyone, at least, they have the idea to live ecologically. But the change starts slow. But somewhere it starts very quickly, and somewhere it starts slow. But it is changing. It is changing to ecological civilization, where I think we have put a huge effort in it. It's we are on the path now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Chen. And continue with Professor Chen is like we already mentioned, the ecological civilization is allowed, is not only one aspect. So it's a mindset changing, and then it's lots of cultural stuff. So from China's government side, I think there are lots of regulations and also lots of indicators that's coming up to support this ecological civilization. So I don't think it's too early for achieving this goal or trying to achieve this goal. So if we have this idea and we were trying to make it, and then that's a good practice then. Does other panelists, do you have any idea or comments on this question?
I mean, it's always a great question of what it means in practice, right? And I think, it'd be easy to sort of criticize China for being imperfect, because what nation isn't, right? But the fact that there's like an acknowledgement of this is our commitment, and we're committed about it enough to put it into our constitution, and state that this is nationally something we care about. I'll just say, as an American, that's so far beyond where our country is at, where we have leaders that are wanting to roll back climate policies, and nearly half of our population are basically like deniers of climate change, or human caused climate change. I mean, it's so all that to say is I'm really excited that China is expressing this commitment for an ecological civilization, thinking about these big issues as big issues, right? As cultural issues, economic issues, environmental issues. I mean, my understanding of President Xi's idea that green is gold, the two mountain theory,
Yes.
that's very much part of this vision of ecological civilization. It's already an acknowledgement that this is not just an environmental issue, but we also need to rethink our economy. And then that opens the door for thinking about all other sorts of things, right? And how we think about what it means to be human and how we structure our societies. So I actually, and I mentioned before my desire for the U.S. and the China to partner and to collaborate. And President Xi recently visited San Francisco and was in the United States, and the chance of being allies rather than enemies gives me much greater hope for that kind of collaboration. But I think that China has the potential to really lead the way toward an ecological civilization in ways that many other nations just don't have the structure or the sort of vision to do quite yet. And it really is helpful if there's somebody to lead the way. I think it makes it easier for others to jump on board when that train is already moving forward, and especially such a large nation as China.
Yeah, Professor Sukhyun Park, do you have any comments on this question?
Well, I don't have any specific comments on the China's policy about their adoption about the ecological civilization, which is originally coming from their own culture and then their own ideas and like Taoism and whatever. And then, but these days, I feel like it's also related to our belief system, and because we are trained and grew with the capitalism and technologies. And a lot of people, our generation, talk about the solution based on technology. But we are talking about the solution based on nature. So nature-based solution, those things are suggested, but the leaning toward the technology is a part of our belief system, I think, based on our capitalism. So a lot of capital goes to the technology rather than nature restoration or conservation. So the money goes to the technology, and a lot of people think that creates jobs and work and incomes, and those are related to their prosperity. So I think this is very fundamental difference in belief system. So once we do we have to remove all these things, or do we keep these technology things inside in our ecological civilization? So this view has to be discussed more, I think. And even some appropriate technologies or skills that is required to keep our life goals, but sometimes it's high tech, and then with a lot of energy input, and then high tech is not necessarily work for this ecological civilization sometimes. So I think that is also the good important thing that we have to consider when we talk about the belief system. Back to
Thank
you.
you, Professor Sukhyun. And I see Professor David Korten, you have comments?
Yeah, what this brings to mind is the importance of indicators. The indicators that we choose to measure our progress. And as long as we have the indicator of GDP growth, we are going to be distracted and pushed in all sorts of weird directions. And I'm not, the name is a little strange, but the framework that I find most powerful is the framework of donut economics. The idea that essentially, well, first of all, we've got to be clear that you cannot manage a complex system with a single indicator. That's like flying an airplane with nothing but an airspeed indicator. And if you think about that, you know that where that will get you. You will fly directly into the earth. Now, the donut economics framework says, look, we've got two essential issues. One is absolutely we must heal Earth and protect Earth's ability to sustain. So what are the various indicators of the health of Earth? So that's one circle of the donut. The other question deals with meeting essential human needs for every person on the planet. So we get a second set of indicators that are about the basic human needs. I think we might also want to have ultimately a kind of a happiness index or a spiritual well-being index. But we need to be thinking about what are the true indicators and how do we think about them in terms of indexes, like flying an airplane with a whole panel of indicators, and we're balancing as we go and finding our direction, finding our altitude, our speed, and so forth. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to be doing as a human species.
Thank you so much, Dr. Korten. Yes, this conversation has just been very sparking a lot. I can feel that it's been inspiring our emotions just as much as our logical side of the brain tonight. So thank you all for joining, both in the chat and here. I want to read two more questions. I wish I could do one of those automatic summaries of everything you all have said. It has been amazing. And we will be sharing this recording via email and on the Earth Charter International YouTube channel. So before we close, I will read two more questions that we received in the Q&A, and then I will call on each of the panelists to give us a short 1-minute reflection on basically everything that we've talked about today and inspired by these final two questions. So we had an anonymous question, which says, what do you perceive about green colonialism that is now becoming a popular term in viewing the dynamics of action towards environment and climate due to this imbalance between the East and West and North and South? So we have green colonialism and an imbalance in power. And then also we have a question from Natalia, who is asking, how do we collaborate and convince that collaboration is needed with the Kochs of the world that gobbled since childhood everything that Adam Smith had to say over 100 years ago? So we also have this this question about, what Andrew talked about as unecological civilization. So how do we tackle that? Okay, yes, Andrew, I see your hand, so we'll start with you. And thank you all for keeping this brief, but also inspiring as you have throughout this last hour and a half.
Yeah. I'm not sure what our anonymous attendee means exactly by green colonialism, but I assume that it's something similar to what Vandana Shiva called in a recent book, philanthropo-capitalism. where she has this book, Philanthropical Capitalism and the Erosion of Democracy, that got published in 2022. And I think, basically, yes, there's an acknowledgement that some people are using the environmental crisis as a way to make money and to continue to exploit people on the planet. That's a problem. So we need to be mindful of that, speak, truth to power, I guess, and find alternative ways of lifting up a better way of doing things. So thank you for bringing that issue to our attention.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And Dr. Chen, Xia Chen, would you like to contribute some final reflections?
I will just say something briefly about our topic. As I mentioned, just as nature evolves, so should civilization. So now we need different level, different scale of actions, ideas, and thoughts from different civilizations to constitute a future-oriented combination of cultural resources to build an ecological civilization, which give us a very real chance of avoiding hothouse fate. So I hope the world will be better and we will really live in a civilization which is ecologically. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Park, how about you?
Oh, well, I thought about answering the questions about green colonialism, and then I would like to mention briefly about it. And because I understand the existence of the green colonialism between developed and developing countries, and I actually had a chance to chair degrowth session in Global Greens, which is the Green Party's global conference. And then at the time, I thought that degrowth might be a very popular issue in the Green parties, but somehow the South part doesn't really focus on this issue in politically, because they think there is some more responsibility in developed countries. And then also developed countries has more regulations, environmental regulations on the exports from developing countries, and then all industrialization. So like a CBAM, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that actually a barrier for the South or the developing countries industrialization. I know we all talk about the different way of industrialization, or that could be the ecological civilization, but the economic prosperity is still very important. As David Korten mentioned about the donut economics. So based on their social equality, and also the social base is very important for all those countries. So even though we still need to solve the problem caused by the climate change, and also the cause of climate change, but still we need to figure out about the social integrity over the global countries. And also we need to think about the different actions or different responsibility based on their accumulated carbon emissions. So those things are the things that I thought about the green colonialism. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Park. And Dr. Korten, would you like to share some final reflections as we close the webinar?
Yeah, this brings to mind the thing that has long been on my mind from my experience of many years working in international development, in which I came to realize that what economic development was really about, in terms of the way we did it, was getting people off of the land, off of control of their own resources, away from their own ability to grow their own food and meet their own needs, and make them dependent on transnational corporations. Now, one of the fallacies that we can easily slip into here is the idea that in poor countries that we've got to duplicate the rich countries, and then we'll make our adjustments to reduce our environmental burden. And I want to urge that that is absolutely the wrong way to go about it. And anybody who wants to really study that should come to the United States and study how we really live, and study the pain and the exclusion that massive numbers of people experience here. What I came to feel in terms of third world or developing country experience is that if we from the developed countries had played it right, we would have come in and we would have looked at how people were living and then asked a question: is there anything that we have to offer that would actually improve your life? And there are probably some things like immunizations and so forth that would help with a lot of health issues that could have made a difference. There may have been some agricultural techniques, but we would have built from what was there and built on people's control of their own resources. And the last thing we want to do is go further in making countries more like the United States or some other developed country, rather than starting with where are we at right now? How do we get control of our own resources and learn to manage them in ways that will best meet our needs, in ways that are healthy for Earth and healthy for ourselves?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Korten. Thank you so much, Dr. Chen, Dr. Sukhyun Park, and Dr. Andrew Schwartz. Thank you, everyone who stayed on until now or who's watching the recording. I want to remind you that this is a resource that we can continue to share, and we will be sharing. It was also great to see the connections you all made in the chat as well. And I even saw some people planning to get coffee thanks to this. So thank you so much. Personally, I can say that this has helped me recharge my battery, which we need to finish off the year strong. And we're going to see a lot of coverage now for the COP negotiations. A lot has to be done. We're halfway through the 2030 agenda. But we have a lot of tools. We have all this development. We have the Earth Charter, and we have each other. So, and our connection, of course, to the greater community of life. So thank you all so much for being part of this conversation. And I want to remind you to stay tuned, because this is only one of a series of conversations that has been actually been going on for a few years now. And we will be hosting also a conference in April 2024 on ecological civilizations and education. And we would love to see you there as well. So thank you all so much, and have a lovely rest of your evening or rest of your day.
Thank you.